Hello there guys, welcome back.
Welcome back.
Yes, so all of our Mythic guides for Uldir have been released, both on the YouTubes with all of the videos, as well as our written work over on Wowhead, so do go and check both of those things out if you are still progressing through Mythic Uldir. We really do think that they will help you. We've added quite a few new bits and bobs to them, such as the spreadsheets, with this tier being so logistics heavy, with things like Gahun and arguably even Fetid requiring so much organisation and a bunch of micromanaging. We really do think that these will help out. So we are happy in terms of the quality of the guides. We think that they are good.
Yeah.
One thing that we're not happy with at all, and it's obvious that you guys aren't happy with, is the rate in which they came out.
Yeah, I mean, they're pretty much 2 months overdue, and considering we'd be doing, guides for such a long time, it's a little bit embarrassing. I'm not going to lie. I mean, we've had a mixture of real-life shit going on at the moment, and the game obviously isn't in a great state.
No.
As well as running a guild and being interrupted with all the PTR testing that we've had recently. To say we're burnt out is a bit of an understatement, but at the same time, if you accumulate all of these excuses and times it by 10, it's still not really an acceptable reason as to why these guides couldn't have come out, say, 2 months ago. So it's an apology from us. We are sorry.
Yeah,
we don't look to do this again in the future, and we'll show you our better side next tier. For the meanwhile, we have terminated our Patreon. We hugely appreciate all the people that were willing to go beyond just subscribing to the channel and liking our videos by giving us their hard-earned cash. It's very humbling. We're thankful for anyone that did support us there over the past year or so. But at the same time, if we can't provide a consistent service, then we probably shouldn't really be taking your money. We know none of you have complained. Not a single person has contacted me, either me or Alex complained that we hadn't uploaded anything. This sort of came to light really when people pointed it out on our Mythic guides. You hadn't uploaded for 2 months, and now suddenly there's a load of Mythic guides. What the hell's going on? This looks shady as fuck. And we understand that that's how that looks, but we promise you, we're not malicious people. We're not scam artists. We're just shit at managing our priorities and everything that's involved with our lives right now, as well as we're a bit thoughtless. I mean, we could easily have just put an update post on Twitter or anything just to say, yeah, we're not dead, by the way. We're just sorting out some shit.
Yeah.
We really should have done that. But what we are offering to all the people that have been supporting us over on Patreon for the past 2 months, we're offering full refunds. So just contact us there if you do feel like we've cheated or scammed you, and we'll pay you back in full immediately. Just let us know and we'll sort it out. And just to add, just because the Patreon is going, we're not, you can still contact us through Discord, so we can still continue to have our own little chats and shit. We very much want to keep that relationship. But as for where we are now, there's far more wind in our sails, so to speak. Yeah. There is so much content that I'm excited to actually share with you guys because it's going to be good. Yeah. There's actually good content in the game coming, believe it or not. So, yeah, once again, we're sorry, and thanks for sticking around. But let's get on with the main meat of this video. Let's talk about Dazar'alor.
Yes, so the new raid coming out in just over a month. It can't get here any sooner, although I am glad that they didn't bring it out in December.
That is true, yeah.
Nothing worse.
Remember Heimel?
Yeah. Christmas raiding and just generally around the holiday season. Like, if it feels so stressful trying to get it done. I remember I don't think we got Heimel done before Christmas, did we?
No.
Yeah,
we raided all the way up until the 23rd, I believe.
Yeah, and on that day, when we ended the raid, everyone was like, fucking, I feel terrible.
Yeah.
Merry Christmas. So, yeah, I'm glad they decided to, give that sort of space around the holiday period. I think they should always do that. But, yeah, when this raid does come out, I think people are going to be really excited because we've done all the testing for it, and although the testing has been particularly poor quality in terms of just, base game functionality.
From a technical standpoint, the testing is probably the worst it's ever been.
Constant
it was worse
crashes, certain bosses, like, end script's not working, so you're stuck in combat whilst dead and no one can release. It was like, riddled with shit, like crazy, but that's what you expect while testing. Well, maybe not as bad. Yeah, but you do expect a certain amount of it. But the actual bosses, when they are working, and like generally the systems around this upcoming tier look really, really positive. They look really, really strong.
What do you mean by systems?
Well, mainly I'm like kind of referring to the way that they're changing some of their like aspects towards loot sort of thing.
You mean Azerite?
Yeah, mainly Azerite.
Right.
Now, Azerite, this expansion, oh boy, that's a big fucking conversation to have, and it's probably too big. We kind of want to focus on one thing, not fucking everything that's wrong with this expansion. But yeah, Azerite has been a bit of a frustrating point, especially when it comes down to raids. Right now in the instance that we're currently in Uldir, there's 5 bosses that drop Azerite per, armor type. And that means that one boss has only, that single piece. So if you want the mail helm or the leather shoulders, then it has to drop from Zul. And the same with Mithrax, I think, for the cloth chest and the plate shoulders. So if you don't get it from that boss, like, you're pretty much forced to coin it on that boss every single week as well. And maybe you're sat for that boss as well, so it's even more frustrating. There's no way of getting that higher item level, especially if you're raiding in Mythic. There's no way of getting the best shoulders unless you keep just grinding out that boss. Like, I remember for us, it was super annoying on Zul. every single leather where I wanted to come in for that fight, and we didn't get leather shoulders for like 3 weeks.
I think it was longer. I think it was almost 5 weeks without any leather shoulders.
It was insane. It just wasn't dropping. And the thing is, like, although boomkins aren't terrible for the fight, they're kind of also really good at cleaving onto everything. It's like, you gotta get out. So what they're doing next tier, which I think is a really good step in terms of the way that they're handling Azerite, is that all 9 bosses are dropping Azerite, and the first 3 bosses will drop one of each Azerite piece.
That's right.
So you can get head, shoulders, and chest all from the first 3 bosses.
And then the next 3 have the exact same, no?
Yeah, they have the exact same. It might be in a different order.
They're not the same traits necessarily.
No, they are different armor pieces, and there still will be the biz piece.
Yeah.
From the raid, obviously.
But at least there's more options.
Yeah, there's 100% more options. It's way more likely that when you just do your raid, you're going to start actually getting the Azerite pieces in a reasonable amount of time. You'll be less screwed by drop rates, and especially with the whole personal loot thing being mandatory. And if you're going to be running alt runs, there's nothing sadder than an alt getting an Azerite piece and not being able to trade it to a main who's been grinding it out for like the last 10 weeks. Like, I really need the male helm.
Yeah.
I really need the male helm. And then, bam, there goes the shaman who just joined, and then he's got the male helm. It's like, bastard.
This is going to make split raids really interesting.
Potentially.
Because you're going to have people, because there is so much more Azerite gear, and because obviously the Azerite gear is way, way, way more important than any other piece in there for the most part.
Yeah.
And because obviously, like, you're not going to have a Ray anymore. So you're not going to have all the extra buffs.
It's a bit strange they're not including
your current Azerite gear is shit, basically, in next tier.
Well, especially because it's getting the extra ring. The extra ring is
you get the
huge.
extra ring as well, of course. So it's going to be so important that if you are a guild that is split raiding, that you're going to almost encourage certain people to coin early bosses just so they get the item.
And then they can trade the later ones.
So if they get it later, they can immediately trade it, yeah.
Yeah, I think the chances of you at least getting 2 different Azerite pieces throughout the raid now, it's going to be quite high. I think within like 3 weeks, it's pretty reasonable that you might not have your best pieces.
But you'll have some.
But you'll have one of each.
Yeah.
You know, you'll have the raid chest, the raid shoulders, and the raid helm, which certainly was not the case
Whereas,
in Uldir.
well, I mean, right now, my monk still doesn't have 2 archive pieces.
Oh, really?
And he's cleared the instance, what?
A lot.
8 times or something?
Yeah, it's insane. So by increasing the amount of Azerite that drops, while still making it varied enough that still there are biz pieces, but now that you've got the extra ring, chances are that you're going to get your biz, like one of your biz traits, right?
Sure, yeah.
So no Azerite that's going to drop that's going to be useless, but there's still going to be your best ones and the shit ones, but, you know, the shit ones are still nice to have. It's still a nice item level jump, and considering it's going to be accessible throughout the entire raid, it's such a massive jump up for me. I'm actually excited about that part of it.
Yeah, it still doesn't solve the issue with Azerite armor.
No, there's a lot of
There's
issues
still
with
a lot
Azerite
of other
armor.
problems with Azerite armor, but at least it band-aids the situation a bit.
It just makes it less frustrating.
Yeah, it makes it far less frustrating, yeah.
Which is
for sure.
an excellent thing. And one other thing while we're talking about loot, I guess, is quite a minor thing, but they're actually adding in a bunch of little 2 sets, which I think is quite interesting. Yeah. And like little unique uses on items, which I think is like, you know, pretty cool. Why not?
Isn't there a helm, an Azerite helm that generates a gem every 20 hours or something?
Yeah, I think something like that. One really interesting piece off of Jaina is a lantern, and Jaina's got a mechanic, this is relatively spoiler free. Jaina's got a mechanic where she makes a giant blizzard and you can't really see through it. That's what happens in the first intermission. And what this does, whilst you have this lantern, you can actually see further in the blizzard.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and the advantage that give you is practically nothing. Like the things you need to dodge within the intermission, you're going quite slowly anyway, or someone's running up ahead and dealing with it for you, and you just kind of sit around. But like the flavor of that, you're using her lantern to see through the blizzard she's creating. That's really good. And there's like, you know, loads of little bits and bobs. Some of them are very strong, actually. There is a ring and cloak combination that gives you 100 main stat.
Isn't that the crafted ring?
No. What guilds are doing is...
they're crafting the ring so they can...
Yeah, because you could... apparently you're going to be able to craft item level 400 items. So it'll be like the heroic version item. So what a lot of guilds are going to, like, at least planning on doing is that they're going to craft the 400 ring on all the alts, like an item level 400 ring via dual crafting, equip it in both slots. So if they get the ring that's part of the 2 set, they can immediately trade it to one of the mains. Yeah. Because getting 100 main stat, although main stat's becoming less and less good, it feels like already. You know, that normally happens later on where main stat becomes bottom. But for some classes, main stat is already like maybe second or third best rather than being the strongest. But still, having 100 main stat, that's like 2.5 gems?
It's crazy the lengths we have to go now because master loot is no longer a thing.
Yeah. So literally guilds are like making it so all alts have to have dual crafting. So like if that is the way it works, I could be incorrect and it could have just been theory crafted and then proved wrong. But if that is the case where you can craft a 400 ring before you get to the ring boss, which I think is a roughly 6th in the instance, I could be wrong. if you can craft it, then trade the actual new ring to a main, that's huge.
Yeah, it's quite a big advantage, isn't it? So.
Yeah. So 100 main stat, yes please, have that on absolutely everyone in your raid. That'll be huge.
Yeah,
so,
it is big.
But yeah, like I like the whole idea of having these little 2 sets. Since we've lost tier pieces, it makes it so, you know, you are looking for individual items, but it's always nice when you complete a set. Even if it's like a tiny little shit thing. Like, well, I'd say the 100 main stat is kind of like, it's not like super impressive. It doesn't give you like a new change to your rotation, like a normal 2 set. No, not at all. But, you know, it's kind of cool. Yeah. And they've got like slowing ones and like loads of different 2 pieces. So yeah, loot-wise, it looks really good. And some of the trinkets and stuff like that, they've also done this in Uldir as well, with the DPS trinkets. A lot of them kind of replicate the boss mechanic a little bit. Yeah. And they're kind of themed around the boss. And one of the bosses in there called Opulence, which is a treasure guardian. It has a mechanic where you need to stand by yourself and you'll slowly get more and more crit, basically. Mm-hmm. And the trinket that drops off of it does the exact same thing. So if that trinket happens to be Biz, you're going to have to formulate strategies that makes it so those players who have that trinket can stand by themselves or with other people with the trinket. Because if they go too close to someone who doesn't have that trinket, they're going to lose their crit buff.
Yeah.
So that might make it so stacking up in a healing rain means there's 2 little groups within that healing rain. You've got the crit trinket group and you've got the, you know,
the people that don't have
the plebs or the non-casters, I think it is. So they're doing loads of little interesting things. Hopefully the DPS trinkets from the actual raid are actually good though, because this time around they've been a little bit lackluster.
Well, trinkets have been shit the entire expansion for pretty much everyone.
Dungeons are good. Dungeons drop really good trinkets in comparison to raids, and it's just like, shouldn't raids have that sort of advantage? Like a lot of 370 trinkets are better from dungeons, are better from the ones that are raid from 385 for quite a lot of classes, and that feels wrong.
Yeah, it does.
So hopefully they can fix that up a little bit going into next year, make it so the items that do drop actually cool.
One thing I would say going into this raid, and the thing that I'm most excited about, is that although I don't think Uldir was a particularly bad instance,
no, not at all,
there was nothing in it that really stood out and was outstanding. And at the same time, I also felt like Uldir was slightly tainted because of the class stacking thing again. The fact that although you didn't need 4 Warlocks for Gahun,
in the early weeks you did.
Well, in the early weeks you did before they nerfed the orb.
Yeah.
But the fact that you needed Warlocks, the fact that teleport classes were so important, the fact that you kind of needed Rogues and Warlocks for Zul in the really, really early weeks, the fact that they fucked up Fetid so badly, where they had to retune him 4 times.
Yeah.
4 times.
That's pretty impressive.
Why are you testing this boss on PTR or beta if you're not even going to address...
Interestingly enough, they did address it on Twitter. It was said, it might not be in Twitter, it could have been in a dev Q&A. So either or, it came from Blizzard regardless. And they said if you had 370 gear first week and played perfectly, you could have killed Fetid with the eggs in their original location. So
no way.
That's what they said. So let's take their word for it, right? So it was possible, but the fact that they've nerfed those eggs like 3 times or something and made them position slightly differently.
Method, they were not even close.
Yeah, but they weren't 370 though. A lot of them weren't. You gotta remember, week 1 of Mythic, most people, especially first tier of the expansion, like that's when Mythic Plus really starts kicking in. You get good gear.
Maybe I'd like to see that though.
Yeah, well, it would have been interesting. I would love it. I would have liked to see that. I hate Fetid, by the way.
Yeah, I hate Fetid as well. I think the tuning on it completely tainted that.
It's demolished so many guilds.
The fact that they got that so wrong is just amazing to me. I just don't know how they do it. But regardless,
we will talk about that boss eventually.
Getting to my actual point, Uldir didn't really have a boss that stood out to me. It was just a very average instance. There wasn't anything that I thought was particularly fantastic, but there was nothing in there that I thought was particularly shit, apart from Fetid.
I like Mithrax. Mithrax.
Yeah, no. Sorry, yeah. Mithrax is a good encounter. But it's still not Gorfiend, but it is a good encounter.
Yeah.
Whereas this new upcoming instance, it has some really, really cool looking fucking bosses. Mekkatorque #1.
Okay, so we need to explain, because a lot of you guys probably haven't seen these bosses before, so explain the cool mechanic of this boss, right? So the way it works is that little robots will spawn throughout the fight, and these guys just wander around and be a pain in the arse. You can't kill them though. They're invulnerable to damage pretty much. So at points of the fight, the boss will shrink some players. They will shrink up to 3 people, and those people can then jump inside the robots as if it's a vehicle, right? You'll see footage on screen now. If you're normally tabbed out, tab in, and you'll see what we're talking about. What then happens is that you get a UI with 5 different colored buttons. And you can see above the other robots different colors as well. What you need to do is that the people in other robots need to tell you your shutdown sequence, and you need to tell them their shutdown sequence. You can't see your own, you can only see other people's. So say Loz is in a robot and he's got red above his head, and I'm in a robot and I've got blue above my head. I'll say, Loz, press red, and Loz will say, Alex, press blue. And we both do that. And then new buttons come up. So we have to do that 3 times and then the robot shuts down, okay? That is fucking really interesting for lots of different reasons. One, it's random who gets shrunk every time, so you can't assign people to do this job, right? There isn't, you can't have the local, like your raid leader or some loudmouth just go into them every single time and control what happens inside these robots, okay? Everyone needs to be able to talk to each other and quickly take like hold of the conversation, which is quite easy to do with 2 robots. I think that's quite easy to do 2 robots, right? I say you're red and you say you're yellow, whatever. But the thing is on Mythic there's 3. So one person has to tell 2 other people what they are, and those 2 need to tell him what they are, or what's going to happen. And that's all going on while the boss is doing a lot of mechanics that you could maybe get away with not saying anything, but you'd want to talk during it. So you'd
either have to set up a very complex set of rules to deal with all the other mechanics so they could speak, or you're going to have to sort of make some incredibly clever weak aura or rely on some sort of add-on that someone develops in order for each group to communicate with each other. Or maybe you could do like some Gahun style thing. You know, where you press a macro? I've
seen people press macros, because like when you're in the main city, like before a raid test, you see people testing out yell macros and stuff, and there's loads saying, you are yellow, you are green, and all this sort of stuff, so that might work. The thing is, if they make it, so, or if someone is clever enough to make an add-on that can get into the boss and tell you what you've got,
it would ruin the fight.
The fight is garbage from that point, unfortunately.
No, you say that. There's still some very cool aspects.
It's got some cool ideas with it, but that is the main meat and potatoes of the fight. Like, that's the main, like, that's the thing that really holds the fight together. So if you take that out of it, every other part of the fight is easily dealt with. Like relatively, you know, it's like kind of like move from thing.
It's standard WoW stuff.
Yeah, whereas this is like the unique little cool. Yeah, like you have to shut down mini robots, so you're all shrunk down. And talking about that shrink mechanic, actually, I'm just gonna gush about this boss. I fucking love it. Talking about this shrink mechanic, when you're running around and you're all small, people who are full sized, if they walk on top of you, you'll be stunned and take a bunch of damage. So people can literally stomp on the little people that are running around.
And on Mythic, there's a big guy.
Yeah, so on Mythic, when everyone gets shrunk, well, when 3 people get shrunk, 1 person will be enlarged. And that enlarged person can run over normal-sized people.
Yeah.
And those normal-sized people will be stunned just as if they were shrunk.
Yep.
But the thing is, if the huge person steps on a tiny person, they get 1 shot. And the boss teleports you around, by the way. Like, as a group, it forces you into one place.
Raid. So you have to develop a strategy of, like, little people move, medium people move, big guy can move.
Oh, it's going to be insane.
I love that encounter.
It's so cool.
These are the type of fights that make me really, you know, this is the shit that I play the game for. Fights like this, you know, fights that have really stupid little weird gimmicks that just make you smile. And they're fun to do.
Yeah. And like, as I said, they've got to be really careful not to let people be able to track it. They can't, you know, they've got to scenarios roots this up. You can't have something, you can't have a weak aura
that worked out how scenario roots worked, but it did like so many calculations that it crashed your game when you used it.
Yeah, something along those lines. Yeah. So if anyone develops a system that can cheese that aspect of the fight, it needs to be shut down, I think. I think it would ruin the encounter. Like,
we can encourage everyone not even bother to try and hope that no one does it.
Oh, no, so the guilds are already working on developing weak auras for it.
I know that. We can only hope.
I hope they don't, though. The fight is also interesting in a bit more of a minor way. Like, that's all the bells and whistles, all the cool stuff. One thing that's interesting as well is that it really makes use of line of sight. Now, line of sight is used occasionally in fights, but not really as a key mechanic thing. Sometimes you'll find a bit of terrain that you can cheese something behind, like very rarely. But generally speaking, line of sight, you don't use it that often.
Yeah.
This like the rest of the fight, which isn't involving the cool robots, so I guess the standard part of the fight, is all to do with putting people out of line of sight. And the terrain around the area that you're fighting the boss in has got rocks and stuff for you to place people out of line of sight. So it's generally easy to do on heroic. There's 3 debuffs, there's 3 rocks, raid standards in the middle, everyone else goes behind the rocks. Easy as that. But on Mythic, when you explode, when you need to get out of line of sight with the debuffs, it leaves shit on the ground, so you can't go to that location again. Not safely, anyway. So,
and there is a limited amount of space that you actually have to work with.
Yeah, so that's also going to be interesting in terms of you got to work out how many debuffs you have, and with each debuff set, how are you going to assign people, where you're going to put people, and like really the possibilities with that are pretty endless. Really, there's so much creativity that you can do. Of course, Method are going to stream it and then everyone's going to copy it, just like of course, or someone else is going to kill it and release a video before Method, whatever, you know, someone's going to do it and everyone's just going to copy that strat unless something else is really obviously better. But I like the fact that it's full of options in that sense. And it, once again, that's quite a complex thing to be talking about, you know, like, oh, what debuff set is this? Where do we go again? All that kind of stuff. So you're talking about that whilst everyone's like, you're red. No, not you. No, Skull's red. It's like, oh, this is so good. Like, it's like Bring Satan to Work Day when they made this fight. Because it's going to demolish pugs. It's going to be so unfriendly to pugs.
I mean, I remember when we were first talking about Mother. Yeah. And it was like, this is going to be a pug killer. And then everyone just developed the strategy of just, well, you just all fucking run through.
And just hope for the best.
Or you just kill the boss before that even matters. Yeah. You're not going to be able to do it on this one.
Well, no, well, the thing is, on normal mode, everyone can see your thing. Not only the other robot people, but everyone in the raid. So your raid leader who's sat out could say, okay, that person is red, you know, you can have someone carry it. So I think that's a good thing to have on normal mode. Normal mode, it shouldn't be... You know,
on normal mode, you could probably just ignore the robots.
You probably could. They are CCable and everything, so chances are you'll just nuke through the boss. But that boss has got so much flavour with it. It's the gnome guy. He's got, like, explosive sheep. He turns you into chickens. His device malfunctions on Mythic, and it teleports you way up into the air. It's perfect. I wouldn't really change it in any way, particularly. I think it's a very cool fight. I'm sure I'm going to hate it after we progress it, because I'm like, if there's one more time where someone can't fucking call out the colours, it's going to do my tits in that sense. But no, I think it's going to be so good. It really is.
And talking about other good fights in the instance, for me, there's 3 more.
Okay.
One is the Treasure Guardian boss, or Opulence, I think it's called now.
Yeah, they called him Opulence now.
For this encounter, you need to split up the raid into 2 groups. There's 2 pathways that you need to take, and you basically progress it room by room. It's like almost like a dungeon run, like a gauntlet.
Yeah.
And as you go through each room, you have to deal with the set mechanic that the particular mob has. I don't know what it is.
Yeah, it's like a mini boss, basically. Yeah. There's a mini boss in each room, and each time you knock it down, it moves to the next one.
That's
You've got to like go along the paths back up, and then you can fight the boss afterwards.
And you have to deal with the individual mechanics, and each room has a slightly different thing from the previous one. It just constantly changes. As
there's like different
it.
Traps going on as you're going along.
And then as you get towards the very last room, there's rubies that you click on that you can choose which ones you want to click on, and each one will give you a different effect. So for healers, you can choose to put a damage reduction on the entire raid, a shadow damage reduction, which is actually very important.
You need to do that. It's like mandatory, actually. One person needs to do that.
Because in the last phase, you have to deal with a load of shadow damage. DPS, you can choose which ones you want. You can get one that makes it so you do more and more damage if you stand still.
Yep.
And as soon as you move, you start to lose the stacks. Mm-hmm. It's just a very, very interesting fight in that sense. And then the last room, it's like a full-blown boss fight, except you have buffs. It's just like this big fuck-off gold dude.
Yeah,
covered
like
in
an
like
elemental
treasure chests and stuff.
It's really, really neat.
And it's just a massive AoE fest. Ads constantly keep spawning and like move towards the edges of the room and shit.
The thing is as well, they spawn directly under the boss, and there's nothing more satisfying as a DPS who has the ability to burst AoE directly in a like tight space to do that. And like imagine playing Fire Mage there would be so fun. Like Living Bomb as they spawn and then just annihilate it with Combust. And the thing is there's so, like, because of the buffs that you get as well from that fight, this is the fight that I was talking about, that crit buff, right? Mm-hmm. The one where you need to stand by yourself.
Yep.
The thing is, on the fights version of this buff, when you stand by yourself for a long enough time, you'll then get an aura around you that increases everyone else's crit by 100%. So you have a 100% crit strike chance.
Which is just nuts.
Which is super crazy.
Especially for Fire Mage.
For some classes, that's like busted. I can imagine that on like on an assassination rogue directly under the boss of Fan of Knives with those ads up. That's like constant full combo points every single time you crit. It's like, oh god, that's amazing. There's some really interesting parts of that fight. Talking about the mini bosses a little bit, that you like the beginning part of the fight, the phase 1 where you're going along the trapped rooms. The guy on the left-hand side, he just puts debuffs on you. You've got to move out and you leave an orb on the ground. Very simple, right? You can pretty much do that regardless of what's going on in the room. The other guy does a, like, turning around flamethrower style
Which is
mechanics.
A much more difficult mechanic to deal with than the other side.
So much harder to deal with. And the thing, it does a lot of damage, and then he stands completely still. But the thing is, there's, like, huge area of denial areas in certain chambers. So you've got to choose, do I get hit by the boss's fire or the fire coming from the wall?
And there doesn't really seem to be a choice, because they overlap almost like immediately.
Yeah, it feels purposeful that it's like punishing you for it. You can do, like, taking the fire from the wall is better than taking the mini boss's fire. But I don't know, parts of it, That bit feels a bit clunky, honestly. I've seen other people just saying, what can we even do here? So I'm not sure, like, the fact that the left side of the room's so much easier than the right, either the left needs to be buffed to make it harder, or the right needs to be nerfed. Because right now, you'll send all of your best players on the right side, or the most mobile players.
All your immunities.
All your immunities, yeah. And all the stand stilly, I'm just going to nuke the boss style players on the left-hand side.
That's true, yeah. I just think it's a decent encounter. Sure, it probably does need some adjustments. And we'll talk about that when we actually do our boss preview and give a little bit more information on the encounter.
Yeah.
But I just like the way that plays out. And it's kind of similar with the boat boss. There's a boss where...
the Stormwall Blockade.
Yeah, he's at the end of the pier in Uldir, you know, where the war boat thing is, where you do all your missions. He's at the end of that, but before you actually fight him, you have to go on 2 ships.
Yep.
And you have to deal with 2 little mini-bosses. I like that encounter as well.
Well, once again, it's similar to the that's actually strange. I only just thought of that. That's another boss where you need to split your raid into 2 different groups.
Yeah.
It's
like
strange.
10-man raiding.
Yeah, it's like, you do make 2 10-man little raids, and you have to go and do your stuff. That particular boss, as well as the boss beforehand, it does make an interesting sort of idea in terms of how raid communication is done. Mm-hmm. This kind of goes back to Mekkatorque as well, I suppose, in terms of, like, this instance is all about raid communication. Like, one group wants to be calling out one set of mechanics, and the other group wants to be calling out the other set of mechanics. So you're kind of talking over each other. It works well enough for us because, you know, one of the people who helped raid lead on one ship and the other person who helped raid lead is on the other ship. So you just kind of listen to the person that's you're assigned with.
Yeah,
exactly. Try and phase out the other guy. But that's going to be super interesting because that fight, when you're on those boats, is pretty brutal. One of the sides is really brutal.
Yeah, with the orbs, I mean, it took a while for some of the people that, you know, we were raiding with to get over the whole orb situation because they do move really fast.
And it's on PTL with ping, which is a bit rough.
Everyone has, almost 200 ping?
Yeah, roughly.
So, you know, add reaction time and a bit of delay, then it is kind of difficult to do with the orbs. And, you know, they are moving fast and they pretty much one-shot. So that was a little bit rough. But once you got over the ships and you're actually with the main boss, I really, really, really like this part with the ads. So basically you have the whole of the platform is like filling up with shit. There's an ad that spawns. When you kill the ad, he drops an orb. When you pick up the orb, you get a debuff, which allows you to clear the patches up.
Yeah.
When the debuff time's out, the ad respawns. And essentially, while we were testing it, we're still not quite sure how this works. While we were testing it, multiple people could pick up the orb all at the same time.
And you'd spawn like 5 ads from one orb.
Exactly. So you suddenly have shit tons of ads. And then was like, so what if we spawn, say, 20 of these ads, put them at the back of the room, and just cleave off them for boss damage?
This is all 2.0. This
really
is why they're removing Shuriken Storm or the buff that you get Shuriken combo from rogues. It's like, look, we're not changing the boss now. Fuck that. Just make it so rogues don't get anything from it. So yeah, it's certainly an interesting fight. It's quite quick as well. Like,
it is quick, yeah.
When you're talking about going back to the boats briefly, you got one mini boss, and once you kind of get used to his mechanics, once they hit 50%, he jumps to the other ship, and the woman on the other ship will jump to you when she hits 50%, and they don't have a shared health pool either, so you got to make sure your DPS is relatively even. So you get to get both sets of mechanics as well. There's quite a lot of fights where if you're assigned to a certain job, you don't see the entire fight. You know, even talking about that Treasure Guardian boss, although on Mythic you're being teleported around, you know, if you only ever see the flamethrower guy, you won't see the debuff guy.
Yeah.
So it's kind of nice that they do switch around, and on Mythic, the entire raid also needs to be switching around while the bosses are switching around. It's going to be fucking mental. It's going to be so good. But no, I am a big fan of that fight as well. I think it's definitely got some interesting ideas. The last phase is going to be super...
Yeah, so, I mean, the whole point of that last phase is making sure you keep the platform clean whilst you also prevent the ads from reaching the boss, because if they reach the boss, they'll start charging into him, and he'll just explode and you'll just die.
Yeah.
So you've got to have some way of making sure the ads either constantly die, and then you have maybe one person just running around soaking, sort of like Ragnaros Mythic style.
Right.
Being the Dowser, clearing up the path. Maybe a rogue's really good for that job. You just sprint around all the time and clear it all up. But at the same time, maybe one person's not enough. Maybe you'll need 2 people to do it, which means you're going to have 2 more ads spawn, and ads keep spawning throughout the last phase anyway, and it'll get to the stage where you have 10 ads up all trying to run towards the boss. And we should probably say, when we first tested the boss, you could take the ads all the way down towards the fucking temple.
Yeah.
You could have them literally over 100 yards away.
Yeah, you can't do that anymore.
And then the second time we tested it, there's a fucking wall in the way.
Yeah.
And we're like, oh shit, well there goes that strategy.
Yeah, we're literally just going to dump them. Right, there you go. I ain't dealing with that
Set
shit
up
anymore.
like a series of gateways and teleports and rolls, and you can send a monk 200 yards down the road. But yeah, no, that strategy went out the window, unfortunately. But yeah, no, I think there's a lot of things you can do with that boss. I think it's going to be interesting to see the top guilds when they first kill it, how many like monks they bring just to spam ring of pieces. Well, also, there might be potentially a strategy, you know, we were saying that you could clump them all up and cleave off them constantly.
But like things like Warlocks, if Affliction is going to be still as strong as it is now, there's been so many whispers of Affliction getting nerfed, but we haven't really seen too much of it just yet. But yeah, if you can constantly dot all those ads at the back, you're just going to be steamrolling. It
might also be a legitimate strategy to actually have loads of them spawn, and you just have, like, I don't know, a couple of warriors just constantly killing them off.
Yeah, maybe.
I don't know.
It's going to be interesting to see exactly what the strats. Once again, it's a boss that gives you quite a lot of options, even though it has a relatively limited tool set. Those one ads, the fact that it might even be a bug that you can spawn multiple ads from one orb, I think it is. But
I think it is. Well.
But like the way that you deal with those ads, it's on paper very clear. You kill them, use their orb, let them respawn. Kill them, use their orb, let them respawn. But there's so many avenues of like cheese that you can think of. It's like, well, how can we?
Especially when the ads while they're up, they don't do additional damage or anything.
No,
like that.
They just slowly walk towards
the boss. As long as they don't get to the boss, you can have a billion of them.
Well, Shadow Priest being buff as well. If they're all dotted up and you're using, you know, the spirits. I was going to try and say the first word, but that ain't gonna work. If you're using the spirits that give you insanity each time, you could have real long void forms off of those guys. So that'll be an interesting thing as well, especially with Shadow Priest being buffed. I'm so looking forward to that. It's gonna be good. But of course, we got to speak about Jaina.
Yeah, so that was the last one on my list. I think Jaina, I mean, we didn't see the entire encounter. We should probably say that now. We only saw phase 1 and 2.
Yeah.
And the intermission in between, of course. There is another intermission and a final phase. From what we've done and from what I've seen from other guilds, it's a fantastic fight.
Really
good
fight.
Really, really like the fight. I mean, there's aspects of it that do feel completely off right now. It definitely wasn't ready to be... I mean, of course, they were trying to get some sort of information, but it didn't feel ready, in my opinion, in Phase 1 at least, to be tested. There were so many things missing in Phase 1 for the most part, where it did feel a little bit slow.
Yeah.
I would say. But it's just a very interesting fight. I love the interaction with the boss with Bloodlust. The moment you Bloodlust, Jaina just goes into an ice block.
Yeah, for 20 seconds. And that is actually very interesting. And like initially just like lol memes, because that's what, you know, if you see a Bloodlust in a PvP situation, you might just sit in an ice block. That's kind of cool. And it's nice that it reacts in that way. Although it doesn't do it with drums. Whoops. You gotta add that. You gotta add that in. But the idea is that stops the boss functioning.
Yeah, so when we were first doing it, we thought that you had to interrupt certain abilities.
With lust,
and that's what we were doing during Phase 2, and then we realised, actually, no, that's not what's
silly,
intended at all. The fight isn't actually intended to be done that way, or at least it doesn't seem like it is. But I think the main reason why I like Jaina is I just like the flow of Phase 2.
Yeah.
It feels like a very... it feels like a fight where you're not necessarily going to stack classes to cheese, which is even better.
It feels like just a standard, good, solid boss fight at the end of it.
It feels like Blackhand.
Yeah, and it's very, very, like, you can just see from the footage that we have on screen now, it's so, like, cinematic in that sort of sense. Like, you start off on a ship that's, like, sailing through the seas, although if you fall off the ship, you realise that everyone's still ruins the immersion a little bit. But at least you can be rezzed. That's quite nice. If someone gets close enough, they can res you back on. But yeah, you're on the ship and other ships are coming in and firing at you. You got to have some people on the cannon shooting back at the other ships, whilst you have to like deal with all of the fire that's going on.
It's like playing Sea of Thieves.
It's a little bit Sea of Thievesy, yeah, I suppose. It's really quite cool. And the boss's abilities, they are quite impactful, although maybe the phase lasts a little bit too long. Maybe that's just because she has a high health pool because of testing. That normally happens. They just like ramp up the health pool a little bit so you can actually see everything. So that's really cool. And then the intermission between the things, she teleports off into the sea and makes a giant ice like arena. And you've got to go through the blizzard. This is the thing I was talking about with that little lantern earlier. You've got to go through the blizzard, which you can't see, towards her, whilst dodging all of these different tornadoes and like little ice swirlies on the ground and all this shit. And then you get to her, interrupt her, and then you've got to fight her in a giant arena. And you're slowly but surely becoming more and more cold via a debuff. And if you get too cold, you'll be frozen in ice until someone breaks you out. Which is like, it just flows, it feels correct. It feels like the right thing for a frost mage to do, you know?
Yeah.
All of these are frost magey sort of mechanics, but working well in a boss fight. So you've got to find heat sources and use those heat sources to warm yourself back up. And then eventually when she gets into the intermission, she does loads of crazy shit, which we'll talk more about in our video, I'm sure. But the fight itself, it just feels like a really solid encounter. And although it was, you know, PTR and bits and pieces didn't feel completely right, it was, you like, sometimes you can just see an end boss and it's like, okay, this is going to be
you
cool.
can just tell this has potential.
And it didn't feel fiddly. Like, we just came from Gahun, right? And Gahun, I wouldn't say is a bad end boss. There are problems with that fight, but I wouldn't say it's a bad end boss.
I'd say the heroic version's much better than the mythic version.
Yeah, so would I. That boss is a fiddly boss. It's all about assignments. It's all about logistics, like we were saying earlier. It's all about, you have to do this job at this time while you do this job at this time, which is okay, but those people doing those jobs aren't really fighting the boss at the same time, so it's a little bit strange, you know? It's a little bit of a different fight, which is okay, but by the looks of it, we're going into an end boss. It's not going to be like that, which is nice. You don't want two of the same sort of end bosses on the trot, because otherwise it's just like, oh god, I have to do assignments again, you know?
Yeah.
But then making that kind of difference, I think, is really clever, and I think it'll be refreshing for people going into this instance.
Yeah, I'd agree. And I mean, I'd say the instance as a whole, the majority of the encounters seem really, really strong. We've said before that the first boss is usually as important as the last boss, because it really does set a tone for the rest of the instance.
Yeah.
When you first walk in there, you want to meet a really cool boss. Doesn't have to be hard to be cool. Just need an interesting encounter visually or mechanically. You kill him and then you move on with the rest of the instance. You're excited to see what's next.
Yeah.
This very first boss is terrible.
I
It is the worst boss I've ever seen.
I don't want to
remember Hellfire Assault? That was better.
Well, the thing is that, like, as you said, it's all about visuals and well, hopefully both visuals and mechanically. It's interesting. Like, even Hellfire Assault, although mechanically it kind of went down, it wasn't particularly interesting mechanically, but visually and what you were kind of doing, it was kind of cool. You're sieging the thing, you're fighting off tanks, and you're using that ammo to shoot back at the giant citadel. How cool is that? Or even
they could have done that better.
Yeah, well, they could have done it better, but you know, the idea behind it is quite cool. And then you've got Immersius, which, although I'd agree, I'd say mechanically it's a little bit dull and quite repetitive and everything in Siege of Orgrimmar. Visually, it's a giant fucking water elemental and he's splitting and you've got to kill the ads as they move towards him. How cool is that? Or Talok, that's, I would say, mechanically and visually, it's really cool. You're descending in an elevator, dodging beams, you've got to move the goo all over the place, and you're running out of goo, and you've got to run away from him as he runs towards his hammer, and he's a giant robot that you've been seeing throughout that entire leveling zone. How cool is that? Then this one is, you meet a random paladin in an alleyway. That's it. It's like, what? It's called Champion of the Light, right? And for Alliance, you do have a different version, but it's like the mechanics are the same. The way that all of the like Alliance and Horde stuff, all of them, they work mechanically the same, except you'll fight them in a slightly different place.
Slightly different names on the abilities.
Yeah, and slightly different names on the abilities. But for the Horde, it's literally in an alleyway. You meet a paladin. It feels like the first session of a shit D&D campaign. It's like you leave the inn, you go into an alleyway, you find a paladin, roll initiative, and it's like, why do I even care? You know, the abilities that she does, it's like okay-ish mechanically. This fight would be fine if it was looking really cool, if there was like a cool theme behind it.
I don't know. I don't think there's much to it. I think there's too little for this first boss, because ultimately all it is just tank her on one side, tank the ads on the other side, make sure the ads are interrupted. The boss like sends a wave, like a beam towards the ads that will buff them, that you either need to move the ads away from it or you just purge the buff off them. Otherwise, it's just nuke the boss until she puts up her seal or whatever it is. It's
basically, if you hit her during phase 2, she'll gain stacks, and if you kill ads during phase 1, she'll also gain stacks. So phase 1 is nuke boss, phase 2 is nuke ads, and then phase 1 happens again, and then you nuke boss, and then phase 2 happens again, you nuke ads. And slowly she'll gain passive stacks here and there, and like she does at points do burst AoE, so the whole idea is, can you survive the burst AoE?
Yeah, so as she transitions out of phase 2 back into phase 1, she does a pulse of damage to the entire raid, and the idea is if you go too high on your stacks because you were, you know, killing the wrong mob at the wrong time, then the raid will get one shot. But aside from that, there's nothing else going on. Literally nothing.
No, it's very dull. And the thing is, if you actually do it the intended way of attacking her in phase 1, killing ads in phase 2, attacking her in phase 1 again, doing that constant cycle, like, you can do it that intended way, and it's like, it's like whatever. At least it opens you up for another strat where you just ignore everything and nuke the shit out of her and like just let her get her really strong.
The stacks only matter when she does her AoE explosion on the raid.
Yeah.
Her tank damage isn't high enough to really matter.
It honestly felt like the best strat, or the strat that you'll be using maybe from week 2 onwards, if not week 1, is just tank the ads at the side, nuke the boss. Just nuke the boss.
Just nuke the boss before she does her explosion on the raid.
And she doesn't do any mechanics that directly affect the raid as long as the tanks position the ads properly.
Yeah, because the wave always goes to the ads. So if you're not between the boss and the ads, you can just stand to one side and just nuke the boss.
Yeah.
So do you understand why I think this boss is shit?
Yeah,
I mean, come on.
Yeah, and like, as I said, just look back at all the other previous first bosses from instances. Even Highmore, you're fighting in a giant arena and there's tiger pits and all that stuff. And on Mythic, there's tigers chasing you. Oh, that's crazy. This, I don't even, like, she might be a really important lore character, but I feel like I might have like a just below average knowledge of like roughly what's going on this expansion. I have no fucking idea who she is. And same with the Horde version, the Alliance version when they're fighting a Horde Paladin. I have no idea who that person is either. So it's just like, oh yes, Grumblebeard Dwarfhammer needs to fight you. And it's like, why? Who are you? Fuck off. And then you go to the next boss and it's a giant monkey. How cool is that? Let me fight the giant monkey first.
He's actually a good fight.
He's not bad at all. And you got this.
Well, he's a lot better at least.
He's a patchwork fight, which we normally don't particularly like, but at least it's kind of got cool bits and bobs with it.
Yeah, we're not sure that's necessarily true though. It might not be. It very much, I mean, at first glance, it very much looks like a patchwork fight.
Well, it's like a 4-minute encounter and the damage seems to be the most important thing.
I'm more thinking if they actually make it more of a healing check, say Vectis style.
Oh, right.
That would be much better than making it a damage check, at least in my opinion.
But, you know.
Maybe that's because I'm a healer and I hate patchwork fights. But I feel like that fight is very much, just to explain the monkey, he gains energy over time. When he gets to maximum energy, he does a big stomp. And this stomp does ridiculous amount of damage if it channels for the whole duration of the energy. So the idea is that you need to try and proc his trample cast before he gets maximum energy. And you do that by hitting him with an orb that spawns from an ad. So you've got to time them throughout the fight, making sure that his energy never goes too high. And it's a fun fight. At least while we were testing, I really enjoyed that encounter, especially on Mythic, where there was multiple ads and that whole energy system. You needed to think out a little bit more than what you would say on Heroic. So yeah, that fight I think is actually good. And
I think it'll be a really good first boss, you know? Well, the thing is, if it is a patchwork or an output style fight where it's checking your output, at least it is like solidly second. It's third for Alliance. Alliance have a slightly different boss order, but you know, it's in a linear sort of pattern, you know, whereas Fetid was either the third boss or the fifth boss, so it was kind of, you know, you didn't know exactly what you're going to be getting into when you went in that fight. It could be third boss hard or it could be fifth boss hard. Yeah. This is always second or third boss hard. You know, it's always going to be roughly that difficulty.
I was going to say that it was going to be a tight damage check, but then I thought, you know, Butcher, he technically was like the second boss.
But
I guess
it was optional.
You could go around him, I guess, yeah. I really hope they don't go down that road of making that boss a damage check. I will be so fucking sad if they do that.
One thing that is really, really sad, and I think we all need to take a little bit of a moment, is that on Horde side, this is just a big white monkey fella, and it's, you know, it's nice. But the Alliance get an undead monkey fella. Like, how cool is that? Like, you can't even see it as Horde. We need to transfer, dude. Okay, we're all going to go gnomes, and we're all going to fight the undead monkey version.
Oh, you fight him on the other side of the temple, don't you?
Yeah, on the other side of the temple. I think the whole idea is that the Horde killed him, and then, like, they might have rezzed him or something, and then thrown him at the Alliance. Cool, yeah. It's probably something along those lines.
But mechanically, he's the same.
It's the exact same mechanically. And that's one thing I did want to talk about, I guess, as we're kind of, like, getting towards the wrap-up of this, is that the whole Alliance and Horde having different versions thing. We haven't really seen, like, at least in my knowledge, we haven't really seen anything like that since ICC, where you had different skins for the boat, the airship encounter. And now you kind of do have relatively different bosses. Like, not in terms of mechanically, but, you know, visually and in different areas of the instance.
Yeah.
I think it was very clever that they did it early. So the early bosses, say that the Alliance have an easier time on the first boss because they have more space or something, which actually does actually feel that way. It might not be, but it does feel it, at least. You're in a much more open air sort of space.
Yep.
If the Alliance have an easier job, who cares? It's the first boss, right? No one's going to be like, oh, if we had that little bit more room, then we would have killed it. Oh, I hate being Horde. Or vice versa. And so I'm glad they did it for the first 3 bosses, and I think it's a cool little twist, you know? Why not give the Alliance a slightly different version to Horde? Like, it's just, it's all the assets are still all there, and it's just like a reskin, you know?
Yeah.
They didn't build a new part of the map for Alliance to play in, or Horde
I think
to play
the reason
in.
why they've done it is just because, you know, story reasons. They're kind
100%.
of forced to do it that way. I don't think it's something that they're going to look to repeat later on down the line. It's not like it's not the thing that makes the instance stand out by any means. I mean, all it is you're fighting the same boss in a different place who looks slightly different.
Yeah, but it's nice to have those changes. And one thing
is it going to encourage you to make an Alliance character just to go and see the boss in a different skin? Well, absolutely not.
Dude, that undead monkey though, pretty good. The thing is also is that they've got this whole idea of the Alliance bosses and then the Horde bosses, right? So whenever, say you're a Horde player, in order for you to go and do Treasure Guardian, in order for you to go do the Conclave boss, which also is a really good boss, we kind of skimmed over it, but I'm sure we'll talk about it. I guess in our video we'll talk about it. So for you to do Treasure Guardian, Conclave, and then Rusticon, you play as Alliance. Like, you will, when you will go to do those bosses, you will literally be changed into another race to fight them. As an example, when I was playing Blood Elf, every single time during PCR testing, I was turned into a human. Mm-hmm. And I get all the human racials as well, which is really quite cool, I suppose. And then with Alliance, in order for them to do Mekkatorque and the Blockade and Jaina, they need to be Horde. They'll be transferred over our way. It's still not in my head 1,000,000% clear exactly how the paths are going to work. So everyone's going to clear the first 3 bosses in pretty much the same order. I've already explained the whole monkey difference, but you clear the first 3 bosses. As Horde, do you then need to go and do the Alliance bosses before you go do the Horde bosses? Or do you have a choice? Do you have to do the Horde bosses before the Alliance bosses?
It isn't completely clear.
It isn't 100% clear. I think it's going to be, the way the story works, at least in my head, is that everyone does the first 3 bosses, who gives a fuck? But then the Alliance go into the city and, go and fuck about with Rusticon, and then they make their retreat, and as they make their retreat, the Horde chase them out and fight off Mekkatorque. They do go through the blockade and then catch up with Jaina.
Yep, that makes sense.
Yeah, and that's how it's listed in the Dungeon Journal as well. So I think it'll probably be a linear story, but it's, it's interesting to see anyway. There's got little bits and bobs with this
One
whole
thing
phase.
I would say as like a hardcore, if you was a hardcore Alliance player, would you be thinking, well, I don't give a fuck about like these last 3 encounters because it's got nothing to do with the Alliance? It's a negative thing for the Alliance because it's the Horde fighting us back. I don't want to play as a Horde character.
Maybe. I don't know.
Do people like that even exist?
They do exist, but I don't think they cross over much with people who are desperate for loot. And I think the higher numbers will take over any sort of, like morality that you might have.
Yeah.
So yeah. But no, this instance does look to be very interesting. There are, as I said, a couple problem bosses, but they're far outweighed.
One.
Yeah,
There's one.
Yeah, it's far outweighed by some of the really, really positive looking stuff. And we can't wait to show you all of it in far more detail for each individual boss. And
over
I guess
the next few days.
Yeah, hopefully we can get that all up before Christmas. That'd be good.
Yep. But yeah, we'll leave it there. I think that's all we've got time for today. We've been talking bullshit for almost
far
an hour
too
now.
long. Yeah.
But thank you very much for watching. Again, thank you very much for hanging around, and we'll see you all very, very soon with all those previews. So hang around on the channel, and we'll catch you soon.
Thanks for watching.
Thanks for watching.